What happened in Illinois and Iowa shocked everyone. 1 storm. 0 visibility. Massive pileups across major interstates. Drivers were trapped, emergency crews overwhelmed, and tragedy followed. This isn't just weather, it's a warning. No one got on the highway that day expecting their life to change. Engines started, radios played softly, and tires rolled over pavement that looked wet but harmless. It felt routine. Ordinary. Just another winter drive through the Midwest. But winter doesn't need an invitation, and it doesn't announce when it decides to turn roads into traps. In a matter of minutes, highways across Iowa and Illinois stopped being routes home and became scenes of fear, confusion, and irreversible loss. The storm moved faster than anyone anticipated. Snow intensified, winds howled, and temperatures dropped just enough for invisible ice to spread across major interstates. What drivers couldn't see was what would undo them. Traction disappeared. Control vanished. And once the first vehicle slid, the chain reaction had already begun. Along Interstate 80 in eastern Iowa, traffic was still moving when the first crash occurred. Then another. Then several more within a short stretch. Cars began drifting sideways with no warning. Semi-trucks jackknifed, blocking lanes in both directions. Drivers slammed their brakes only to feel nothing respond. Vehicles slid like they were floating, colliding at angles that made no sense, piling together as visibility collapsed into whiteout conditions. Within minutes, the interstate turned into a frozen standstill. Hazard lights blinked uselessly through swirling snow. Drivers stepped out of their vehicles and immediately realized how dangerous it was. The pavement was a solid sheet of ice. Standing upright was a challenge. Walking was nearly impossible. Some people shouted warnings to others still arriving, but the wind carried voices away as more vehicles slid helplessly into the wreckage. Emergency calls flooded dispatch centers. Panic filled the voices on the other end of the line. People were trapped in cars. Some were injured. Others were terrified of being hit again. Snow kept falling, covering wreckage almost as quickly as it formed, making it harder to see who was hurt and who needed help first. State troopers, sheriff's deputies, firefighters, and paramedics rushed toward the scene, but even emergency vehicles struggled to reach the crashes. Plows fought against relentless wind that erased cleared paths within seconds. Responders were forced to park far away and walk across ice toward damaged vehicles, carrying medical equipment through freezing gusts that cut through layers of gear. Inside crushed cars, victims waited. Some were bleeding. Some were shaking uncontrollably from cold and shock. Others stared forward in silence, trying to process how an ordinary drive had become a nightmare. Rescuers moved methodically, checking each vehicle, prioritizing the injured, stabilizing wrecks that could still slide. Every decision mattered, because one mistake could send another vehicle skidding into the scene. Authorities eventually shut down long stretches of Interstate 80 completely. Ramps were closed. Traffic was frozen in place for miles. Drivers stuck far from the crashes had no idea what was happening ahead of them. They sat for hours, engines running intermittently to conserve fuel, watching snow pile up on windshields while flashing lights faded in and out of visibility. As the response continued, the reality of the situation became clear. Multiple injuries had been confirmed. And later, officials delivered the news no one wanted to hear. At least one life had been lost in the Iowa incidents. A person who started the day with plans and expectations would never make it home. While Iowa struggled to manage its unfolding disaster, Illinois was facing its own crisis. On Interstate 55 near Springfield, another violent multi-vehicle crash erupted under similar conditions. Snow and ice turned the roadway into a hazard zone, and several vehicles, including large trucks, were involved. Southbound lanes were shut down as first responders arrived at a scene described as devastating. Witnesses reported slick pavement and rapidly deteriorating visibility. Drivers said conditions changed in seconds. One moment the road felt manageable. The next, vehicles were sliding uncontrollably. The crash site became tangled with twisted metal, shattered glass, and stranded drivers standing helplessly in the cold. Emergency crews secured the area and rerouted traffic while medical teams worked through the wreckage. Victims were assessed and transported to hospitals. State police coordinated the response while investigators began the long process of documenting what had happened, even as snow continued to fall and temperatures remained dangerously low. Then came confirmation of another heartbreaking loss. A teenage passenger had died as a result of the Illinois crash. The news rippled through responders and officials on scene. For one family, everything changed in an instant. For others injured, recovery would take weeks, months, or longer. Winter had taken more than just vehicles that day. The human cost of these storms isn't always visible from traffic reports or camera footage. It's in the silence inside damaged cars. It's in the phone calls made from the roadside. It's in the long nights families spend waiting for updates that may never come. Ice doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about experience, confidence, or urgency. Once grip is gone, physics takes control. Traffic cameras and eyewitness videos captured haunting images. Endless lines of stopped vehicles fading into whiteout conditions. Emergency lights flashing against blowing snow. Officers shouting instructions that were swallowed by wind. Drivers warning each other about sheets of ice, telling anyone who would listen to stay home if they didn't know how to handle conditions like this. Tow trucks couldn't reach every vehicle immediately. Ambulances had to prioritize the most serious injuries. Crews worked for hours in brutal cold, clearing wreckage piece by piece, documenting scenes carefully to prevent further accidents. Nothing about the process was quick. Speed had already caused enough damage. Meanwhile, long backups stretched in both directions across multiple highways. Travelers were immobilized for hours, some running low on fuel, others sharing blankets or helping strangers. The storm didn't care how prepared people were. It tested everyone equally. Officials later emphasized that winter storms can overwhelm major highways within minutes. Roads designed for speed become liabilities when ice forms suddenly. Heavy trucks require long stopping distances. Passenger vehicles follow too closely. Visibility drops faster than reaction time can adjust. One slide becomes 10 crashes, and 10 crashes become a disaster. As conditions slowly improved, lanes reopened in stages. Plows finally gained ground. Wreckers removed damaged vehicles. Traffic began moving again, cautiously, quietly, as drivers passed scenes they wouldn't forget. But even as roads reopened, the weight of what happened remained. Vehicles were destroyed. Lives were altered. Families were grieving. Emergency crews continued working long after most people were safe at home, knowing that winter wasn't finished and that the next call could come at any moment. Authorities urged motorists to monitor official travel advisories, avoid unnecessary trips, and respect road closures. Not as warnings written on paper, but as lessons written in loss.